Welcome back. In episode 1, we did not optimize. We observed, measured, listened to the engine without touching a single thing. Now in episode 2, we prepared the foundation. Before world politician, before PLA, before edge-lot, before fully edge reduction, the engine itself must be configured for stability, for memory safety, and for long session open world work. It's not decoration, it's scaffolding. A strong building needs a strong base. So today we set the project-wide engine defaults that make scaling possible. Slow, precise, Unreal Studio level preparation. This episode is not flashy. This is silent correctness, that kind that prevents you from suffering later. When we are going to talk about the project setting, there are two places that we could set the project setting at. The first one is inside the editor itself. So if you go to the edit menu, and from there we could load the project setting. One thing that has a very big cost in our case is ray tracing and setting related to light. So if I search with ray tracing, you could see the amount of controls or setting that we have in related to ray tracing is very limited. First of all, we use hardware ray tracing when available for lumen, and also we have ray trace shadow for the direct light, which by default is turned off, and also support hardware ray tracing, which is by default turned on. This is the general and overall switch to activate the hardware ray tracing, and this one is just using hardware ray tracing for the lumen lighting. But when we activate support hardware ray tracing, it will activate all of hardware ray tracing feature, which is so costly for the real-time game. And as you can see, we don't have much control over selecting which feature of ray tracing we want and which feature we don't want from the editor side. But fortunately, from the project folder itself side, so if I go to the config folder on the project side, we have default engine INI, and inside the default engine INI, which is a file that you could open that with the Visual Studio or Notepad or Notepad++. Inside that, we could hard code the feature that we want. So one part of that file which has a big impact on the GPU side is render setting. And as you can see, some features are activated by default, like that ray tracing. And as we talked, we don't want all of the ray tracing features. So that way, I can just copy and paste the setting that I wanted to turn to off here. So that way, I will get rid of the unnecessary feature of the ray tracing that I really don't want. So I don't want that to be used for the allostatic lighting or force all ray trace effects. Or we can limit some of those features to some values. So basically, by the editing the default engine INI, we could have a more control over what feature of the ray tracing we want and what feature we don't want. And we could do the same thing for the lumen as well. So by this part, as you can see, I'm controlling what feature of the lumen or hardware related to lumen I want and what feature of that I don't want. And same thing for the path tracing. If you're not going to render a cinematic shot, we could turn off the path tracing at the project setting. So this way, we'll get a very better performance on the engine side. There is a live connection between this file and the setting that we have at the editor. So for example, if I get back to the editor side and change something like activating the mega light, which is a great feature and will let us to get rid of the light complexity. Before I check that checkbox, let me show you the light complexity that we have in this scene, and also let's get rid of the stat GPU. So if we go to the optimization pass and take a look at the light complexity, just as you can see here, the black is good, this color is bad, and white is very bad. And as you can see, because the amount of light that we have here, the light complexity in this scene is so high, and basically it's telling us the light complexity here is very bad. But fortunately, in Unreal Engine 5, we have a new feature called Megalight, and by activating the Megalight, it will fix all of the light complexity, and as you can see, suddenly we are getting back from the white in this area to roughly around here, and that is telling us that some sort of we fixed the light complexity in this scene. And if we get back to the file that we had at the project folder, which was here, let me close everything and reopen the default engine file. Default engine 1. And if you take a look at the bottom of the render setting, which is here, you could see the Megalight just added there. So by changing or ticking something at the editor side, this text file will be updated as well, and we immediately will get the effect of that. But sometime to see the full effect of that, we need to reopen the editor. So let's close the editor and reopen the project. And if we get back to the lit mode, load the scene and run the game, let's bring up the stat FPS again. And you could see so far we get a big gain on the FPS. The FPS was roughly between 20 and below 40, and now we are reaching about 60 FPS, which is so great. So just by do not touching anything in the level and just setting the project setting, roughly we get 20 FPS gain here, which is great. Cool, this session was mainly about the project setting, and in the next session we are going to move forward with converting this map to a world partition map. So stay with us and see you in the next session. Thanks for watching.